in the late 90s, had a teaching background, was working with some inner city youth and things like that, and then had an opportunity to do a rope access course. So I did my ORADA level 1 back in 1998 in the UK, hence the accent, and then worked in the UK, level 2, did my level 3, and then in 2000 came over to Australia. When I turned up in Sydney, there were 3 ORADA level 3s in Sydney. I was one of them. Saw an opportunity to start running training, run a business, started 5th Point, running ORADA training, and that's sort of been me training wise in Sydney, and travelling internationally, whether it's working on the ropes, auditing, assessing, all of that stuff over sort of the last 20 plus years.
And what year was it actually that you started 5th Point?
5th Point as a sole trader I started in 2001, and then it went PTY in 2004.
The hot topic of the last couple of years, COVID. It's affected a lot of businesses. How do you think it's affected the rope access industry in particular?
It's been an interesting couple of years. From a training point of view, we've been pretty busy. People have still been training. There's been a few lockdowns. I'm sure you remember when Western Sydney was locked down.
Yeah.
A lot of rope access guys, a lot of tradesmen were working out there, but they were allowed to travel for education.
Okay.
So if they got a COVID test, and then they could travel. So we had a lot of those guys coming in and upskilling or whatever, rather than being proactive. You know, rather than sitting at home, they were upskilling and things like that. On the work side, obviously that was a strain on a lot of businesses because they lost a lot of their skilled labour and stuff like that. But in Sydney especially, they've increased some heights on some of the buildings. So I'm sure you've seen the construction around Sydney, it's going bigger than it was.
Oh, yeah.
So that's increased the amount of work, you know. Scaffolding comes down on a build, and then they realise all the things they've missed. So then rope access sort of ends up in there, whether it's internally or externally. So it's been growing, lots and lots of new businesses appearing. Rope access is quite an easy industry to get into. From a business point of view, you've got a ute, some ropes, some insurance, and the skills. You can start a business. So there's a lot of sort of smaller businesses appearing.
And what did you think set apart the businesses who succeeded during these periods and the ones who maybe didn't fare so well?
Being able to diversify, being able to change up what you're doing. If you were primarily a window cleaning company, and then all of a sudden they don't need 3 window cleans a year because there's nobody sitting in the office, could you sidestep, still using rope access, but utilising different skills of different guys? That seems to be the ones who have pushed through and managed to come out the other side of COVID, which has been great. You know, we haven't been affected as badly as a lot of places, but you know, we still had our lockdowns and stuff like that.
And you've been working on quite a few interesting projects to contribute to the rope access and height safety industry.
I had a project, and it was replacing the lanyards on a flagpole down in near Sydney Harbour. So it was looking across the harbour, which is an amazing view at the best of times. But then we were on top of HMAS Sydney mast, and that came off of a ship in, I think it was 1919, and then it got placed where it is near the harbour in 1936. So it's been sitting there. So this big steel structure, and we had to climb horizontally, so vertically up it and then horizontally across to change these halyards for the flags before Anzac Day. And as I'm climbing out there, swinging in the breeze, it's 50 metres to the ground, but it's 150 metres to the water. So nice exposure. Job's pretty straightforward, but then you're climbing along and all of a sudden you get to a weld where 2 bits of metal are joined together, and you know that hasn't been inspected for quite a few years. So then you're going past it, but that's you know, a bit of exposure is always good. So that was a fun job a couple of years ago. Now been getting involved in quite a lot of green wall stuff. So putting structures on the side of buildings so they can have plants hanging on there to reducing carbon footprints and stuff like that. So that's been a bit of fun. A lot of crane work, things like that. Last week I was up at Gosford Hospital. They've just put, I think it's like 30 gigawatts of solar panels on the roof of the hospital. and we were running all of the cables through confined space, through shafts down to the basement. So that was pretty cool. I went up on the roof to have a look at the solar panels, and I couldn't see them all, and it was just panels for as far as you can see. So yeah, some sort of environmental stuff sort of been happening recently, which is pretty cool.
And I heard you're starting a new course as well for height safety.
Yeah, we've got at Fifth Point we've got a couple of courses. A gap that we've seen in the industry is there's people inspecting height safety systems, and they're doing the basics of whether they're doing pull tests or doing visual inspections, but not knowing where that references to the Australian standards or to the legislation or regulation, and how the standards and the regulation sort of link together. So we've developed a course. It's a one-day course for people who work on safety systems. So some classroom stuff, talking about the standards, getting people all over that stuff, and then they have to go around the training centre. We've got a roof area with safety systems on, and then in the training centre as well. So there's about 6 or 7 systems, and they need to inspect.
Well, that's pretty good at going across like different brands as well on the inspection.
It's not. So it's not a particular brand. Because we've got the training centre set up with various different things. So whether it's anchor bolts being pull tested, or type 2 fall arresters, ladders, cable systems. So we've got loads of different ones out there, and it's more about the actual system than saying this brand and that brand.
Yeah, well that's genius, because a lot of the courses that are out there, they're only brand specific, aren't they?
Exactly, yeah. So
well done, it's a big opportunity.
Yeah, so this is trying to get people, thinking about the standards and knowing where to look to get the answers. The simple things of how long do you need to test an anchor for, and everybody will give you a number, but where does it actually say that in the documentation? So. Speaking
of standards, the Australian standard 4488 has been replaced with an ISO standard, hasn't it?
So the history of the backstory on that is AS NZS 4488, 2 parts, was released before I started doing rope access back in 1997. So obviously it's a dated document. And what Standards Australia have done is they've taken the international standard, the ISO standard, pretty much word for word, and they've branded it with the Australian standard. So it's now called AS NZS ISO 22846, and this is the rope access standard, and it's replaced one of the 4488s. The other one, to do with equipment, is still current, but it's now been, last June it superseded it completely.
And what does that mean, like an actual technical change for the guys out in the field? Do they need to change any procedures?
Obviously, if people are referencing an old standard, they need to be looking at the new standard and making sure they're conforming to it. Big changes that I see reading through it is, in the old standard it used to say you need to be deemed as competent.
Yeah.
And how do you deem somebody as competent? Oh yeah, so that was always an interesting one. If they'd done a course 10, 15 years ago, they were deemed as competent. Now it states in there that it doesn't talk about levels as in such, so not like you are a system with level 1, level 2, level 3. It talks more about sort of technicians, supervisors and things like that. But if you sort of look at it and you understand the ORATA system, it's sort of got those levels, because when it was written originally a few years ago, there was some people from ORATA involved in writing the ISO standard. But it does state in there that you need to have undertaken a formal training course with an independent assessment. And you need a supervisor on site, and they need to have been assessed to a supervisor level. So to me, if you're reading that, supervisor level, that's an ORATA level 3. Formal course with an independent assessment, recertified every 3 years, that's an ORATA ticket. So if you've got these sort of standalone courses,
that makes sense.
That you do it once and then walk away, I'm not sure how they're going to fit with it.